Ever find yourself driving home late? Just the sound of your tires on the asphalt, headlights cutting through the darkness, and that empty stretch of road. Or is it?
Yeah, there's just something about that scenario that, like, gets under your skin, right? Taps into something primal.
You hit the nail on the head, and that's exactly where we're headed in this deep dive. We asked for your experiences based on the Spanish radio show, Milenio 3, all those stories about phantom encounters on the open road, vanishing passengers, unsettling premonitions. It's really incredible stuff.
It really gets me is how many people shared their stories. It's like every bend in the road could lead to something strange.
It really does feel that way sometimes, doesn't it? So, okay, where do we even begin with this? I guess the one that always comes to mind, the most common one, is that classic vanishing hitchhiker. You know how it goes. Cruising down a dark highway, middle of nowhere, and there they are, that lone figure, often a young woman. You think about maybe giving them a ride, battling that feeling of should I or shouldn't I, but then that human instinct to help kicks in, and then boom, gone. Poof. Vanished, leaving you with nothing but chills and a whole lot of questions.
It's like that story is almost hardwired into us.
Uh,
Like something out of ancient folklore, but in a modern setting.
mhm.
It makes you think about those in-between spaces like a highway after midnight, haven't seen another car for miles.
Yeah.
Suddenly the world feels a little off, doesn't it?
It does. And it's not just being afraid of strangers or the isolation. There's got to be something deeper, right? Maybe something about realizing just how fragile life is.
Right, exactly. For centuries, roads have represented the unknown. I mean, that's where, for a long time, your fate was decided. Life or death, just like that.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder if that's where all these stories come from.
Speaking of that, one of the stories sent in that really stuck with me was Lorenzo Abad's encounter. Back in 1981, he said he picked up a hitchhiker. And get this, the encounter was actually documented by the Spanish police.
Whoa, okay, now that's a detail that makes you want to know more.
Right, and it's like his story isn't even unique. Think about the Malaysian legend of the Lang Swar, that shape-shifting entity, often disguised as a beautiful woman preying on travelers. Or in Hawaii, Pele, the volcano goddess who appears to those who disrespect the island. It's like a warning.
Like every culture has that story, that myth, reminding us that not every road takes you where you expect to go.
And some of those Milenio 3 accounts take an even darker turn. It's not just vanishing hitchhikers, but figures appearing as, like, omens, foreshadowing accidents, sometimes even death.
Yeah, like a signpost on the road, but instead of directions, it's a glimpse into a future you don't want to see.
It's like that feeling when you're driving in a bad storm and you just get this, I don't know, this sense that something bad is about to happen.
You're on edge. It makes sense, though, right? Our senses are already heightened when we're driving, especially at night, and even more so in a storm. You have to be ready for anything. So it makes you wonder, in those moments, how much of it is really happening and how much is, all in our heads.
Especially when you hear stories like the one from Emilio. He and his father are driving down this road near Jabugo, and this terrifying old woman appears, seemingly out of nowhere. And what gets me is they both saw her. Like, how do you explain that?
It's like that Irish myth of the banshee,
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
that spectral figure that's supposed to warn of a coming death. It's interesting how these stories, these figures, they pop up in cultures all over the world.
They really do.
But it also makes you think, could it be something like, what's it called, confirmation bias?
Confirmation bias, yeah. Like, we see what we're expecting to see.
Exactly. If you're already a bit spooked driving late at night, it wouldn't take much for your brain to take something totally explainable and turn it into, well, something much creepier.
So, like, our own fear creates these phantom encounters.
Not necessarily creates, but maybe
Huh?
like enhances, amplifies. It's like our expectations, those feelings we try to ignore. Sometimes they have a way of influencing how we see things, especially when we're already a little vulnerable.
Okay, that makes sense, I guess. But what about those cases, those stories, where it goes beyond just seeing something? The ones where people describe actually feeling something, interacting with something. How do you explain that away?
That's when it gets really interesting. Because while there might be perfectly normal explanations for some of these stories we hear, there are those that just, they make you stop and think twice.
Right, like that story from Miguel Angel. He was driving his truck, picked up an elderly man. Sounds normal enough, right? But then, get this. A few moments later, the guy vanishes. And we're not talking about a hitchhiker hopping out at a this was from a locked truck while it was moving, or Monzi's story, her aunt and uncle were driving, two-door car no less, when they pick up this young woman, and like the others, she vanishes. But not before warning them about a dangerous curve up ahead. It's just, I don't know.
These aren't just fleeting shadows, right? These people are describing being in such close contact, and you can tell by their stories they're convinced about what happened.
It's scary, but it's like, as much as it freaks us out, there's something about these stories, this human element that I think we all connect with.
I completely agree. I mean, think about it. These stories, regardless of whether they're true or not, they tap into something we all crave, this need to understand what we don't know, our fascination with the things we can't explain. It's powerful.
It's like we're almost wired to be drawn to these mysteries, even though at the same time, they kind of scare us.
Exactly. We tell these stories, we share them, we keep them alive because they speak to something deep inside us, something that goes way beyond logic and reason.
It's weird. We live in a world of like dash cams, GPS, you name it. You think by now we'd have figured the stuff out, solved it, or at the very least debunked it, right?
Right. Like with all our technology, all the ways we document everything,
Hmm.
and yet these stories are still here.
It really makes you think, doesn't it?
It does. Like maybe the more we try to understand everything, to explain it away, the more these mysteries, I don't know, like they just dig in deeper.
Maybe that's the point. Like a little reminder that some things just are what they are, that not everything has to fit into a neat little box.
And maybe a good reminder for us to, like, take a step back from all that tech sometimes. Let ourselves feel a little bit of that wonder again.
Like a digital detox for the soul.
Exactly. And maybe, who knows, by letting ourselves get a little spooked every now and then, by really listening to these stories, we open ourselves up to something more, something beyond what we can see and touch.
It's like the things that really make us think, the things that really stay with us. Those aren't the things we capture on our phones. They're in those in-between spaces where what we know and what we don't, where they kind of blur together.
Like a phantom hitchhiker on a dark road.
Exactly. So next time you're driving late at night and you get that shiver running down your spine, maybe don't be so quick to dismiss it. Maybe it's just a little whisper from somewhere else reminding you that the world's a pretty big, mysterious place. And that even with all our fancy gadgets and technology, there are still some things we may never explain.
And you know what? That's okay. If anything, those mysteries, those encounters, they teach us to be a little more open-minded, a little more aware of the world around us, and maybe even ourselves.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And on that note, we'll leave you with this. Next time you're on that deserted highway, late at night, and you see someone standing on the side of the road, would you stop? Think about it. And until next time, keep your eyes on the road, but don't forget to keep your mind open to the possibilities, because you never know what you might encounter out there on the open road.